Let me tell you a little story. In the hours following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, the president's brother and the sitting Attorney General of the United States, made a phone call to John McCone, the director of the CIA. He asked him directly, "Did your people do it?" McCone, without confidence in his voice, said he did not believe so, almost as if he was hoping. Robert Kennedy was not satisfied with that answer. According to people close to him, he spent years quietly investigating his brother's murder on his own. That question, "Did your people do it?" is where the story begins. To understand what happened on November 22nd, 1963, you have to go back 2 years earlier. In April of 1961, directly off the coast of Florida, the United States government launched a covert military operation against Cuba. The goal was to overthrow Fidel Castro, who had taken power in 1959 and aligned Cuba with the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. The operation was called the Bay of Pigs. It was planned and organized by the Central Intelligence Agency, and it failed completely. 1,400 CIA-trained Cuban exiles landed on the island expecting U.S. air support. That support never came. Within 3 days, the operation collapsed. Over 100 men were killed. More than 1,000 were captured. President Kennedy took public responsibility for the failure, but privately he was furious, and he directed that fury toward one man. Allen Dulles had been the director of the Central Intelligence Agency since 1953. In that time, he had overseen some of the most significant and covert operations in American history. In 1953, his agency orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, restoring the Shah to power in a CIA-engineered coup. In 1954, he did the same thing in Guatemala, orchestrating the removal of President Jacobo Arbenz in an operation called PB Success. Dulles was not a man who accepted failure, and he was not a man accustomed to being held accountable. However, following the Bay of Pigs disaster, President Kennedy fired him. Publicly, it was described as a resignation. Privately, Kennedy told advisors he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Allen Dulles, one of the most powerful intelligence figures in American history, had been dismissed by a young president who had been in office less than 3 months. He did not take it quietly. What most history classes leave out is who the CIA recruited to help execute the Bay of Pigs operation. Before Fidel Castro took power in 1959, Cuba was one of the most profitable territories in the Western Hemisphere for organized crime. Havana's casinos, hotels, and trafficking operations generated hundreds of millions of dollars annually for American mob families. When Castro seized power, he shut all of it down. Overnight, two men lost more than almost anyone else. Santos Traficante Jr., the Tampa-based crime boss who had run gambling operations in Havana for years. He was actually imprisoned briefly by Castro before being released and expelled from the country. Carlos Marcello, the New Orleans crime boss who controlled one of the most powerful organized crime territories in the United States, with deep financial interests in Cuba. Both men wanted Castro gone. The CIA wanted Castro gone, and so a working relationship was established. The historical record, including findings from the Church Committee, a U.S. Senate investigation conducted in the 1970s, confirms that the CIA did approach organized crime figures about assassinating Fidel Castro. This was not a theory. It was a documented covert program. The mob had every reason to cooperate. Getting rid of Castro meant getting Cuba back. The Bay of Pigs failed anyway, and in the aftermath, something happened that neither the CIA nor the mob had anticipated. Robert Kennedy, serving as Attorney General under his brother, dramatically escalated the federal government's pursuit of organized crime. Prosecutions of mob figures increased significantly. Wiretaps expanded. The pressure was unlike anything the major crime families had experienced before. Carlos Marcello was actually deported by Robert Kennedy, physically put on a plane and removed from the country, before eventually making his way back. He was reportedly furious. Santos Traficante, according to documented testimony, later reviewed by congressional investigators, was overheard telling a Cuban exile associate in 1962 that President Kennedy was going to be hit. That testimony was reviewed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1979. Meanwhile, Allen Dulles, now removed from the CIA, remained deeply connected to the intelligence community. He continued meeting with the agency contacts. He never fully stepped away. By the fall of 1963, the men who had worked together to try to remove Castro, the CIA, the mob, and the Cuban exile community, all had significant grievances against the Kennedy administration. November 22, 1963.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
President John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, Texas. He was 46 years old. Within hours, a suspect was identified: Lee Harvey Oswald, a former U.S. Marine who had defected to the Soviet Union in 1959, then returned to the United States in 1962 with his Russian wife, without legal consequence, during the height of the Cold War. Oswald was arrested the afternoon of the assassination, not initially for the murder of the president, but for the shooting of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. He was charged with Kennedy's assassination that evening. In the hours that followed, speaking to reporters, Oswald said to them, "I didn't shoot anybody. I'm just a patsy."
One statement, please. I'd like some legal representation. These police officers have not allowed me to have any. I don't know what this is all about.
You killed the president?
No, sir, I didn't. People keep asking me that. Sir?
You shoot the president?
I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
Back up, man.
Come on, man. No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
President?
He never stood trial. 2 days later, on November 24th, while being transferred between Dallas police facilities in front of television cameras in a room full of law enforcement.
Let me have it. I want it. Being let out by Captain Fritz. There is a prisoner. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic. Absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot at point-blank range, fired into his stomach.
He is shot. He is shot. Oswald. It is Oswald. You're... Was that the man that shot the man, or do you know? That is the man that shot the man.
Oswald was shot and killed by a man named Jack Ruby. Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner, told investigators he acted alone, that he did it out of love for the president, that he didn't want Jackie Kennedy to have to endure a trial. That was his explanation. What Ruby did not volunteer is what the public record shows about who he was. Jack Ruby had documented relationships with organized crime figures going back decades. His name appeared in FBI files connecting him to mob associates in Chicago and Dallas. More specifically, investigators later documented contact between Jack Ruby and associates of Carlos Marcello, the New Orleans crime boss who had been deported by Robert Kennedy and who, according to multiple witnesses, had spoken openly about having the president killed. The man who silenced the only suspect knew people connected to one of the men with the clearest motive. In the weeks following the assassination, President Lyndon B. Johnson established a commission to investigate the murder of his predecessor. It was called the Warren Commission, named after Chief Justice Earl Warren, who led it. The commission was assembled to provide the American public with answers, to examine the evidence, to follow the record wherever it led. Their conclusion, delivered in September 1964, was that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. There are aspects of that conclusion that have remained contested by researchers, forensic analysts, and government investigators ever since. Among them, the autopsy. Doctors at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, who treated Kennedy when he arrived, documented what they observed as an entrance wound in the front of the throat, consistent with a shot fired from ahead of the motorcade. The official autopsy, conducted later at Bethesda Naval Hospital, reached different conclusions about the trajectory of the wounds. Two sets of medical professionals, two different findings. That discrepancy has never been fully resolved. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reviewed the evidence using acoustic analysis and concluded that there was a high probability that two shooters had fired at President Kennedy, and that the assassination was likely the result of a conspiracy. That is the finding of a United States congressional investigation. But perhaps what the Warren Commission is most remembered for, at least among those who have looked closely, is not what it concluded. It is who sat on it. Among the 7 members appointed to investigate the assassination of John F. Kennedy was Allen Dulles, the former CIA director who Kennedy had fired following the Bay of Pigs. Hale Boggs was appointed as well, the Louisiana congressman who later privately expressed doubts about the commission's conclusions and who represented a district where Carlos Marcello had operated for decades. Boggs had documented interactions with Marcello's associates. The man Kennedy fired was appointed to investigate Kennedy's murder, and a congressman with ties to a city that had a mob boss operating in it with a motive to kill Kennedy. These are the men that conveniently sat on the same commission. It would be one thing if this were an isolated moment in history.
This is a CBS News special report.
Dan Rather reporting for CBS News from New York. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was shot to death by an assassin late today.
Robert Kennedy has been shot.
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.